just fine since service dogs are already in and out of the building regularly. But the county commissioners had to vote again, and this time unanimously chose to end the visits over concerns of people with dog allergies. One county commissioner promises it's not because the county doesn't like puppies. Eben Brown, Fox News.
And Disney's new streaming service called Disney Plus will launch in the U.S. on November 12th of this year at $6.99 per month. And that's nearly half of Netflix's standard $12.99 plan. According to Variety, the subscription video-on-demand service represents Disney's biggest and most aggressive move into the video streaming wars. By pricing it well below Netflix, the Mouse House is betting it can rapidly drive up Disney Plus customer base with a melange of content that appeals to multiple demographics, including movies and TV shows from its Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, and Disney brands. Find more news now at onenewsnow.com.
Hi, friends. There's a new show in town on Urban Family Talk, nightly, 7 p.m. Central. Join me, C.L. Bryant, as we build the bridge to conversation throughout our great nation, the greatest nation on the face of the planet, the greatest success story the world has ever known. Nightly, the C.L. Bryant Show over Urban Family Talk, 7 p.m.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Julian Assange embarrassed virtually everyone in power in Washington. He published documents that undermined the official story on the Iraq War and Afghanistan. He got Debbie Wasserman Schultz fired from the DNC. He humiliated Hillary Clinton by showing that the Democratic primaries were in fact rigged. Pretty much everyone in Washington has reason to hate Julian Assange.
The White House floated a proposal to release captured immigrants into sanctuary cities to send a message to Democrats. But Immigration and Customs Enforcement pushed back on concerns over liability, negative public relations, and budget issues.
The Ohio governor signing today what critics condemn as the most restrictive abortion law in the country, and what supporters celebrate as a victory, one certain to be challenged in court.
It's the essential function of government to protect those who cannot protect themselves.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Oh, yeah. It's Friday. How's that working out for you? So, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being here today. Thanks for making your home at American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Guess what? We got another jam-packed show, and it's going to be full of, well, we're going to have good discussions, but we're going to be chatting with someone here in the next segment, Hannah Cox, National Manager of the Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. Now, you guys know I'm a supporter of the death penalty. I do think we need reform in our criminal court system to speed up the process and to use all the technology available to us to make sure that people are not wrongfully convicted or placed on death row for 20 or 30 years only to be exonerated later by DNA evidence. Now that we have that, we should see much fewer incidences of that. And so we need some reforms. But to say that we need to just toss the death penalty out, well, it doesn't reflect what poll numbers say from Americans, and it doesn't reflect a desire for a civilized and well-developed society to ensure that people who are the most heinous among us, who will kill again and again and again, that they are disposed of so that the rest of us can be free from the opportunity to be killed by these people. So she's joining in. We're going to have a chat with her about her perspective as a conservative who wants to see the death penalty abolished. And we'll take your calls all this hour. I'm so excited to get to chat with you. In fact, you're the guest of the second, the opportunity is yours during the whole show. 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. So right now, we got to get to, first of all, the Ohio heartbeat bill and the proposed exemption for Black women that cites slavery. So this one really gets my blood boiling. And the reason is because out of all the different groups in this country, especially the groups that are demographic box groups by the Democrats, of all the groups that they could cite as being more vulnerable to this bill or what have you, they readily admit that, yeah, black women have the most abortions. And therefore, if you tell them they can't abort after a certain time, because descended from slaves, yeah, that means can't make good decisions, can't meet deadlines, can't do anything. So can't get voter IDs, can't live without Democrats. Just think of all the things that the Democrats have told black people they can't do. We can't do anything without Democrats. And here we can't even, meet the 6-week deadline. So you've got a state representative, and she says historical rape and forced birth imposed on enslaved women, is the reason why blacks should be exempted from the heartbeat bill. Janine R. Boyd, Democrat, says she needs to offer this amendment to the House committee after the Ohio Senate passed the heartbeat bill, SB 23, banning abortions after a fetal heartbeat is detected. The heartbeat usually becomes detectable between 6 and 9 weeks in pregnancy, and many women do not know they're pregnant at 6 weeks. So the bill advanced through the Ohio House Committee on Tuesday. It will likely be signed into law by Ohio Governor Mike DeWine if it passes the full House. The measure will not only bar women from having an abortion once a fetal heartbeat is detected, but will also fine physicians who violate the law up to $20,000. So this is a comprehensive, far-ranging attempt to rein in what has become really an alternative form of birth control, abortion. So during the hearing on the bill on Tuesday, Boyd proposed this amendment which would allow an exemption for black women. She says black women's history, quote, includes rape and forced birth imposed on enslaved women and black women after slavery. She also has this stuff up on her website. Here's a further quote, I consider the slave trade and how black slaves were once treated like cattle and put on a stud in order to create generations of more slaves. Now, so am I disagreeing with the historical truth that she's talking about here? No, I'm not. That's the sad truth about just part of what slavery was, enslaving human beings. It wasn't just black slavery in which this was the way it was. This is the way it is with all people who are enslaved. They're forced to do things that they don't want to do because they're treated like property. But the question is, because I'm not even going to read the rest of what she has going on here because she's using this rhetoric to gin up emotions and to make people feel bad. Nobody in that room, nobody in that space has ever been a slave, and no one in that room has ever enslaved anyone. And not that I'm so big and bad, but I definitely, had I been in that room and had an opportunity to submit testimony, I would have asked, would anyone in this room who has actually owned a slave or been a slave, please stand up? And of course, no one would have, because we are far past the abolition of slavery. And so then my question to her would be, why are you bringing that up? There are no enslaved black women in America. There are plenty enslaved in the Muslim world where Islam is practiced. The Middle East, they still are running a booming slave trade of whites and blacks. But here in America, slavery is no longer the law of the land. It hasn't been for generations. What is the reason why you keep bringing up this difficult, honestly true, but difficult and irrelevant history? Since no black women are currently held as slaves, because if they were, they wouldn't be able to have an abortion. Now, would they? Did slaves have the right to say, I don't want to have my master's child? No, of course not. So this whole line of reasoning is flawed and only being used to try to make people feel guilty. And everybody in that room who's white should have immediately just been like, excuse me, this is irrelevant. You're submitting information that is irrelevant and not germane to the topic at hand, because none of us have ever owned any slaves or raped anybody. And none of the black people in the room have ever been owned as slavery. Slavery was outlawed before you were born or I was born. There's nobody in here who was alive during when slavery was actually the law of the land. And that is the way we have to approach this. When someone starts bringing up the issue of slavery, you should, I don't care what tan you're sporting, if you are permanently untanned or periodically tanned, permanently tan like myself, no matter what your ethnic background, you were not alive when slavery was the law of the land in this country. Now, if you're at a discussion or a book club or a book that you're reading has the topic of slavery in it, or maybe you're in a teaching environment where people are learning about slavery, or someplace where slavery is germane to the conversation, then obviously that would be a discussion and there would be nothing inappropriate about that. But if someone is telling you, hey, white person, you should be feeling bad about slavery, well, of course we should all feel horrible that slavery existed. And I think we all do. But what does that have to do with the price of tea in China today? Nothing. We do not hold guilt for being owned as slaves historically or owning slaves historically, because that was all rectified, and the blood that was spilled during the Civil War has atoned for that entire horrible episode. It's over. It's in our rearview mirror. It shouldn't be in the rearview mirror. It should be behind us, something that we know historically happened, something that we study when we're coming up through the years in our education. And then we just accept it, just like other horrible things that have happened. I mean, wouldn't Democrats hate it if every time they brought up a spending bill, someone brought up all the people who were killed in gulags by the socialist nations, all of the times that socialism killed hundreds of millions of people, all of the people who've starved to death in socialist regimes because they just didn't have enough food or anything to eat because the economic system collapsed? How about all the people, hundreds of millions who were killed under communism? What if every time a Democrat brought anything up about spending or taxation or railed against capitalism, we just started talking about the dead bodies and, you know, the way they used to bury them in mass graves? People weren't even buried and treated like individuals. They were just literally thrown into pits and, you know, covered over. Or the way Jewish people, they would literally be taken onto cattle cars. Their homes would be confiscated and given to other people. All their wealth, their art, everything parsed out amongst Nazis, and they would be on the cattle cars. They didn't know where they were going. And sometimes the Nazis would let them off the cattle car and shoot them right next to a mass grave that had been dug, a huge hole in the ground. They'd shoot them so their bodies would fall in, so they wouldn't even have to lift them up and place them in the grave and then cover them over. How about every time a Democrat brings up anything having to do with anything that's idiotic, like socialism or single-payer health care or any of that, we just start talking about all the times that socialism has killed? Now, I think that's hugely unproductive. I think that's not the way that you have discussions about policy or anything else. But I'm just so exhausted by this constant, it's like the minute you get your head up straight, you lift your head up and you start trying to do something as a black person in America, here comes another Democrat, often a black Democrat, people who have legislatively have done nothing. The Black Caucus, what have they done? What have they done exactly to improve the lives of black Americans in this country, besides every time you turn around, bring up slavery and go, whenever AOC starts talking about how black folks are driving the buses and cooking the food and ironing the clothes and doing the laundry of everybody else. And it's true, some blacks do that, but some whites do it, and a lot of Hispanics do it too. What's so honorable about it when you're black as opposed to it just being a job that you're doing? And why didn't AOC mention the fact that there are literally tens of thousands of black doctors, lawyers, engineers, etc.? Because that doesn't fit in with their mantra of all of us being victims and being too sad and too sorry to be able to do anything for ourselves. And I mean, I know it's Friday and the sun is shining and I'm all geeked out about the weekend, but this is something that has to be discussed. And every single person listening to this, I don't care how old you are, you cannot possibly be old enough to have owned a slave or been a slave in America. So why do you need to feel guilty about it? Why should you be thinking about your ancestors having been enslaved? And why should you be thinking about the possibility that your ancestors might have owned slaves, which actually is statistically so rare for white people, because only 1.6% of white Americans owned slaves during slavery's heyday. When the majority of slavery was happening and the ownership of people was a profitable business that was booming in the South, only 1.6% of those white Americans owned slaves. And so if you think about immigration and how many white people have come to this country since slavery, the number of Americans who are alive today who are direct descendants of people who own slaves is not significant. Yes, those people there's some still alive, but how exactly are you going to pick them out? It's not like people are wearing armbands or they're tattooed, my great-great-great-grandparents owned slaves. We don't know that. And it's not their fault anyway. This is just an excuse for her to try to convince black women that no matter what, that living human being growing in their tummy isn't a person and it needs to be aborted. Everybody else has to abide by the rules, but black women need an exemption so they can keep aborting their babies because goodness knows black women don't want to have babies, which is utter nonsense, by the way. So the committee, thank God, rejected the amendment 11-7. Can you believe 7 people actually voted that black women are too dumb to know when they're pregnant and need an exemption so they can get an abortion when everybody else is outlawed? It would literally mean that the Planned Parenthoods in this state, Ohio, would be open to certain points just for black women and a place to exclusively exterminate black babies, ushered in by the Ohio legislature had they not seen the light and said no to this garbage. Black women had approximately 40% of all abortions in the U.S. in 2015. White women had 49% of the total number of abortions. 13.8% of the U.S. population is black, and about 7% of that 13.8% is black women. So 7% of the women in America had 40% of the abortions, and this nincompoop, this ne'er-do-well, this nabob, Janine R. Boyd, wanted to make it possible in Ohio for black women to be the only one who could abort their babies into the second and third trimester. Unbelievable. All right, we'll be back with Hannah Cox right after this.
Here's Walker Wildman for Redeem Clean Laundry Products.
Not only do you get a great product and you get to obviously clean your clothes, get the stains out and use the multi-surface cleaner to clean your countertops and use the dryer sheets. You're doing all of this and the money's going to support the work of American Family Association.
Redeem Clean Laundry Products were developed by AFA supporters Len Ingram and Jim Duncan to assist in funding the mission of the American Family Association. Redeem Clean products work as well as or better than other products on the market. They're environmentally safe, biodegradable, and they're made right here in the United States.
The great thing about Redeem Clean is not only is the product great, but it goes to support a great cause, and that is the work of American Family Association.
For clean laundry and a cleaner society, it's Redeem Clean. Visit redeemclean.afastore.net.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. Lyle Dorset wrote a wonderful book about the life and ministry of Dwight L. Moody, the great evangelist. It's called A Passion for Souls. One of the things that impressed me as I read this book was Moody's commitment to listening to God's direction and then fully following what God was telling him to do. It's no wonder that the impact of this man's work for Christ and his kingdom is being felt and expanded over 100 years after his death. The worldwide impact, for example, of Moody Bible Institute in Chicago and Moody Church right there in Chicago as well are prime examples. You see, God wants what we do to have a lasting impact. Let me say that again, and I want you to think about that statement. God wants what we do to have a lasting impact. He wants to direct our lives and our activities so that he is glorified and we make a difference, not just for time, but for eternity. Listen to these words in Psalm 37, verse 23. The steps of a man are established by the Lord, and he delights in his way. The delight of God is in the man's way simply because his steps have been established. God wants each of us to look to him for direction. We should ask, where does he want me to go? How can my life count? How can what I do matter for eternity? What God initiates, he establishes. Don't miss that point. God delights in us when we pursue his plan. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. It is not what we want that matters. It's God's plan that makes all the difference in the world. Study his word. Pray. Ask for wisdom. When you walk according to his will, your feet will make a permanent imprint, just like D.L. Moody.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. You can find out more at afr.net. You can also visit our news site, which I encourage you to do. It's onenewsnow.com. Don't miss out on all the fantastic reporting done over there by our news staff, which it's a part of our ministry here at American Family Association. And it's my pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. We have Hannah Cox, National Manager of Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. Hannah, thanks for joining in today.
Thanks for having me, Stacy.
Absolutely. So your piece that you've written says the title is 2019 is a groundbreaking year for eliminating capital punishment. What made you write this piece?
Well, we're seeing an amazing phenomenon continue in 2019 that's been escalating for the past couple of years. We've seen a growing number of Republican state lawmakers continuing to increase bills to repeal the death penalty. And 2019 is a groundbreaking year for that. We have 10 whole states with Republican-led efforts to repeal the death penalty. And so I think there's a lot of momentum happening right now.
Now, what's driving that on the Republican side? Because the electorate of Republican Party politics, meaning the grassroots, the people who do the voting, have not really shifted their opinion on the death penalty according to polling. So what's making legislators take this kind of action?
You know, I think polling is always going to be a little bit misleading on this issue. We always say that support for the death penalty runs a mile wide and an inch deep. And the problem with some of the polls is that they're often self-selecting, and I think that they look at a very small part of the actual argument around the death penalty. What's really happening in this country is a real reckoning that we have a very broken system, and that's true for all of the criminal justice system. But I think if people are recognizing that, the death penalty is certainly no exception. It maintains the same problems that we see in the rest of the criminal justice system. Those problems are simply exacerbated because you're now dealing with matters of life and death. So in reality, if you look at the actual data going on, we see that last year was the fourth year in a row the country actually executed fewer than 30 people. All of those executions were only in 8 states, and over half of them were in Texas. On top of that, new death sentences are down 60% since 2000. And I think what's happening, especially on the right, is people are starting to realize that the death penalty does not actually line up with conservative values. And I'm one of those people. I used to be very pro-death penalty and was for most of my life. And when I actually started getting around the criminal justice system and realizing things like just how much more expensive the death penalty was than any other sentence, realizing why it was expensive. You know, I think many people think it's expensive because it takes too long, which is actually not true at all. Most of the costs are incurred at the trial level. When I thought about what those opportunity costs meant, you know, we're not actually spending those dollars on programs that could actually work and deter crime, and we're not spending those dollars to solve more crimes. When you look at the country, we have 51% average clearance rate on homicides. I think it's unacceptable to spend this much amount of money on pretty arbitrarily selected death penalty cases while we're not getting justice for the majority of victims at all. And on top of that,
let me stop you there for a quick second. You said 51% clearance rate. I happen to know for research done here in the city of St. Louis and Baltimore that the low clearance rate is due in no small part to crimes done in inner city areas where the community does not cooperate with the police. So the connection to death penalty cases is kind of tenuous. And like you said, you're talking about not trusting all of the polls, but the polls have been pretty consistent about why people support the death penalty. And for a lot of individuals, such as myself, it's rooted in a belief that the Bible is true and what it says is true about what God's word has for people who actually murder other people. The 10 Commandments don't say, thou shalt not kill. The 10 Commandments accurately translated say, you will not murder. So there is no prohibition on the death penalty that is biblically based. In fact, many parts of the Bible in the Old Testament and the New support the idea that someone who is prone to killing again should be subject to the ultimate punishment, but not through vengeance, through proper adjudication through the legal process. So I guess my question for you is, because you've morphed on this and you used to support the death penalty, but you don't anymore, why wouldn't you put your efforts into reforming the criminal justice system, specifically the part that deals with the death penalty, instead of simply saying that families that have had their children brutally beheaded by MS-13 members and others like that should simply be satisfied with that person being supported by the taxpayer dollar for the rest of their natural life while they have to go to bed every night without their loved one?
Well, I think I'll answer that. There's a couple of answers packed into those questions there. So first and foremost, as a Christian and a Southern Baptist minister's daughter, I think that you can use the Bible to make a case for and against the death penalty. But in reality, one thing that I became very convicted about as a Christian was that I believe God can redeem anybody, can save anybody at any point if they turn from their ways and turn towards him. And so I have a real problem at this point thinking that it's okay to cut short the time that God has to work in somebody's life. You know, even in the Bible, Paul, who was formerly Saul, was a mass murderer who God ended up using mightily. And so I think that's something that we need to keep in mind as far as the faith-based approach goes to
Well,
this.
and I want to be clear that I don't disagree with you that any person can be redeemed and that forgiveness extends to every human being. But forgiveness for sin does not preclude the natural consequence of that sin. So someone can come to know the Lord as their Savior and be redeemed and go on into eternity to live with the Father forever and still receive recompense for the crime that they committed. You are not automatically forgiven of everything that you've done and then also spared from the consequences. The forgiveness wipes away the sin, but the consequences sometimes remain. Do you disagree with that biblical concept?
I don't disagree at all, and I think there are ways of continuing to hold people accountable and to ensure that they are paying for what they have done when they have taken a life that don't include the death penalty. I think we have many mechanisms at our disposal, and again, I think that when we are employing the death penalty, we are just cutting short the time that God has to work in their lives. And I think that we've seen many people be saved on death rows who are now carrying out Bible studies and saving other people and witnessing to even their own correction officials on death rows in this country. And so as a Christian, that's what I think restoration looks like. It doesn't mean you get to go scotch-free. It doesn't mean that you might even not spend the rest of your life in prison. I think that can be appropriate. But at the end of the day, I think that there's a real issue if we are starting to meddle in these matters of life and death that I think are better left up to God. And secondly, I will say on top of that, you mentioned victims' family members, and I think this is one thing that really impacts me. There's this very false misperception that the majority of death penalty victims' families want this. And in reality, nothing could be further from the truth. There are many victims' family members who do not agree with the death penalty system, who do not want it, who have gone through it expecting to get closure from it and felt misled over that, who felt re-traumatized by the system. And we see them showing up to state legislators advocating time and time again and begging lawmakers, please do away with this. This isn't helping us. There are better things that could be done to help us as we try to rebuild our lives and move on from this horrible catastrophe. And so that was something that really stood out to me. And to address your other question about why not try to reform it, I think the answer to that's pretty clear. We have tried. It was banned in the early 70s over all of the issues that I'm discussing today about it. And as it was brought back in the late 70s, states implemented all of these different metrics and safeguards to try to ensure that it was not arbitrary, that there wasn't socioeconomic or racial bias in the system, that there weren't innocence issues in the system, that it was only for the worst of the worst. But we now have 4 decades worth of data that prove it's operating the exact same way. And so at the end of the day, as a conservative, I know government's fallible. I know it's corruptible, and I know it's marked by a misallocation of resources. I don't think the government is ever going to be capable of carrying out a fair and just system that doesn't entrap innocent people or run the risk of having some of these other operational issues. And I think that is one reason I became firmly against it.
Well, it's interesting that you say you've given kind of a history there from the 70s where there was a reversal and then kind of bringing the death penalty back. And you kind of, the inference there is that this is like 30 or 40 years ago. But in Nebraska, this is 2016, so 3 years ago, Nebraska, 61% voted to repeal a bill that eliminated the death penalty. In Oklahoma, 66% approved an amendment to the state constitution ensuring the use of capital punishment. And in California, which is totally liberal, they don't have any Republicans in charge there, 53% rejected a proposed statute abolishing executions. Now, Governor Newsom is kind of using his power as governor to stop it, but he's not doing that in line with the will of the voters of the state of California, who themselves are very liberal individuals. So I think the issue is pretty fraught, and I read your article. I appreciate you're feeling pretty positively about the possibility of eliminating capital punishment, but I think we're still pretty far away.
I think that we obviously still have a lot of work to go, and a lot of that comes down to educating people. As I said to begin with, support for the death penalty runs a mile wide and an inch deep. It's typically something where you see high support for it until someone takes a 5 to 10 minute time period to just look at the basic operational facts around it, upon which we typically see support very quickly wane. And so I think what's happening is a lot of lawmakers are being confronted with that data, and they're seeing some of these things up close. And so they're a bit more educated on these issues. And so there's a lot of advocacy, and that's one thing we're working to do within my organization, is to really get this information in front of people and let them sit with it. I did not all of a sudden wake up one day and change my stance on the death penalty. I did so very thoughtfully after being presented with a vast amount of research, including which included a report by chiefs of police who even say that the death penalty is the least effective tool in their arsenal for combating crime and making communities safer. And they also say in that the number one thing they really need is more resources. And so when we're spending millions and millions of dollars, far more on a death penalty case than we would for, say, life without parole, that's money that we're not giving them to actually benefit our communities. And so at the end of the day, the justice system should at the very least be ensuring that we are limiting crime, that we are protecting life, that we are ensuring that the methods we're using equal a safer community. When that's not happening, it's time to sit back and figure out what a new approach should look like.
Well, it sounds like you're kind of on both sides of that, because you've said that you don't trust the government to adjudicate, life or death cases, but then you're saying we need to send the same funds that were misused for the death penalty application to law enforcement, which is just another arm of the government. I definitely am always open to hearing more, but I actually have spent a significant amount of time reviewing information that is from the side that you're presenting, the anti-death penalty side, and I'm not moved in the least. I go back to, as a Christian, my dad's in law enforcement. He's not a minister, so, we'll have to kind of weigh that in the balance as far as the validity of my opinion. But still, as a voter and as a person who I have a conscience and I definitely spend time in the scriptures, I don't see anywhere in the scripture where it says that because something that God has decreed has become unpopular, we should abandon it because it makes us feel better, or because a human system is flawed and incapable of operating correctly right now, that we shouldn't try to reform that system and bring it into compliance in order to do what God's word mandates for us, which is we are to use the civil authority to protect the innocent and punish the wrongdoers. And the ultimate punishment for wrongdoing, which is taking of life, is the death penalty. If the death penalty is something that is not being done correctly, or if the governmental system surrounding it needs reform, the Bible does not mandate us to change what his word says or to go with our feelings. We are instead to do the reform efforts to the system to bring it in line with what we as managers of the government and those who are over the church placed there by God. He's over us. We're over the man-made systems. We're to reform the system, not to change our minds or our hearts to make ourselves feel better.
So I would certainly agree that, we're not to change scripture to fit our feelings. That's absolutely true. But I think it's absolutely also incorrect to say theologically that there's a mandate on capital punishment. I don't know what verse you could possibly point to that would insinuate that. I do think there are examples of that being
I'd love
used
to
in the
support
old
that.
time.
Sure.
But if you look at the way their system operated, it's vastly different than ours. We actually have this available on our website for those who are interested. But even the way the system operated in the Old Testament was very, very different than how our system operated. You had to have two witnesses who were actually there at the time of the crime. You had to have those people then come and be present in carrying out the actual execution. There are very many differences between how it was being used and how frequently it was used in the Jewish community versus how our system is used. And so I want to push back on that a little bit. And I also, again, we just had an event at the New Orleans Baptist Seminary last week in New Orleans and had some people who are much more theologically astute than I am from the seminary who were on one of our panels and made this case beautifully, which that audio is also going to be available on our website. But
I understand that you're coming from that perspective, Hannah, but you said you weren't sure where it was mandated in the Bible that capital punishment is something that it's in the Bible. It's actually Genesis 9:6, whoever sheds the blood of a man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image. And then Genesis 9:5-6 implies three theological principles: that God is the author of life, and when God retains the prerogative to define the circumstances under which a life can be taken, God demands that humanity create just societies to protect the innocent, and murder, being a heinous violation of the divine image and humanity, mandates execution as an appropriate punishment. Then you move on into Exodus 20-23, which expands upon those principles. Scholars call this the lex talionis, which advocates for punishment which is proportional to the offense. And then in the New Testament, chapter 12 of Paul's letter to the Romans, he discourages his readers from avenging themselves by quoting Deuteronomy 32:35. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord, I will repay. But he later encourages them to rely on due process through the legitimate authorities who do not bear the sword in vain. The servants of God to execute his wrath on the wrongdoer, which is Romans 13:4. And then it goes on in 2 Timothy 3:15-17, where Paul wrote that before any of the Gospels or Acts of the Apostles were even composed, you have to look at what the Bible says about capital punishment. So I totally understand that you're advocating from your position, which is that you want to see that abolished. But I do kind of take issue with the idea that it's not mandated in Scripture. If you want to argue in support of abolishing it, I'm fine with that. Well, but that's a contradiction to what you said earlier. That's a contradiction to what you said earlier.
Is that while I think you can make a case for it being
no,
permissible
you can't actually push back on contradicting yourself. Thank you, Hannah. You can't push back on contradicting yourself. I'm absolutely willing to listen to what you have to say, but I don't think you should go as far as to say it's not in the Bible, which is what you said a few minutes ago. Well, I just read the one from the Old Testament.
That the death penalty has to be applied to everyone because that's very broad. There's nothing in any of those verses.
It wouldn't.
It
wouldn't have to be applied to. It said in proportion. I just read those scriptures to you. It said in proportion to the crime.
What is the division? What is the division there? What makes one murder worse than another?
Well, first off, it actually describes. I just read that to you. Let me go back. Actually, there's the music. I don't have time to go back. Give people the website so they can review your materials, because I think after our discussion, people will want to delve into this a little further.
conservativesconcern.org, and we're on social media at our acronym, which is CCACDP.
Perfect. Thank you for joining the show today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We'll be back with more right after this.
This is Uncommon Moments. Here's former Super Bowl winning NFL coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren sharing from their book Uncommon Marriage.
Taking on too much was not a new challenge for me and Lauren. We had to be aware when we had been running ourselves down. We had noticed that some of our disagreements, especially the major ones, occurred when we were tired.
Sometimes agreeing to disagree worked for us to help us both think about the problem. We put the disagreement aside for the moment until we could talk about it later, when both of us were less tired or emotional. Ephesians 4:26 says, "Don't sin by letting anger control you." The next time you have a disagreement with your spouse, make sure you're communicating with respect and love.
Tony and Lauren Dungy, authors of Uncommon Marriage, learning about lasting love and overcoming life's obstacles together. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
Bishop Vincent Matthews.
Every one of my children have gone to college, that are in college on an academic scholarship. And we taught them in our home. So reevaluate. Wherever you bought your hair or got it done, one day it's going to be out of style. But your heritage is not just for what am I going to do today. It's for your children's 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 children.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is coming June 20th through the 22nd. Learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Listen, do you really know who Jesus is? And let me help you to know who he is. When you think about all of these kind of false Jesuses that are floating around social media, oh, you know the Jesus. You know, you got the ethnocentric Jesus, you got the political Jesus, the left-wing Jesus, you know, all these popular Jesuses. But the question I think all of us need to ask is, will the real Jesus stand up? Please stand up. Please stand up.
Tuned in to Equipped, weekday afternoons at 12 Central on Urban Family Talk.
This is Fox on Justice. 2 lawsuits moving through the courts have to do with how companies market stuff that we eat and drink. The restaurant chain TGI Fridays sells bags of snack food it calls potato skins. But a woman in New York City is suing, saying, "Those aren't potato skins." She says, "Just look at the ingredient list. Potato flakes, yes. Potato starch, yes, but no potato skins." The second lawsuit is against Nestle's, which owns Poland Spring Water, marketed as 100% natural spring water from Maine. Consumers in 8 northeastern states have sued, saying the Poland Spring in Maine dried up decades ago, and the water in those Poland Spring bottles is ordinary groundwater. A judge in Connecticut has ruled the case can go forward on the claim that Nestle's may not be following state standards on the definition of spring water. Nestle says Poland Spring is exactly what it claims to be, 100% natural spring water. With Fox on Justice, Hank Weinblum, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being here. It is my pleasure to go straight to the phones. I love it when we have lots of callers on, especially on a Friday. This is no different. Let's go to Randy in Louisiana. Hey, Randy. Thank you for calling.
Hey, how you doing? Well, my wife's not around, so I'm going to say, looky here. So, you remember me? Okay.
I do.
Well, looky here. You're talking about the slavery and everything. Everybody wants these reparations.
Mm-hmm.
But who put the slaves into slavery when they were in Africa?
Randy, here you go with all that common sense and history. Go ahead and hit us with it.
Well, I mean, it was their own people, the Africans.
That's
one
right.
tribe. I mean, that's the way I figure it.
Mm-hmm.
One tribe was stronger than another tribe, so they made a deal with the white man or whoever, and they took them into slavery.
That's right.
So
they
their
sold
own
them.
people sold them into slavery
For horses and gold and all kinds of stuff they came over with it, and they were selling their enemies. So it was whichever tribe was dominant would sell off into slavery their enemies to keep them from being strong enough to kind of rise up and go back against them. It's the classic age-old scenario, which means that if they're going to get reparations from the U.S. government, they should also be seeking reparations from the governments of African nations. If you're going to go back there, you might as well go all the way back to its inception. How did the slavery begin? But it's not just that, Randy. It's this idea that we're not all still living in America today with our cell phones and our computers and our TVs and our talking dishwashers. And, we are Americans. We live on the most blessed planet, or blessed nation on the planet. Why would we want to go back to dividing ourselves over reparations? Why would we do it? I don't see any upside to it. And I wanted to say, looky here, you have a good weekend.
Take care.
You too. Thanks for calling. Aaron in Alabama. Hey, Aaron. Thanks for calling the show.
Stacy, dynamite. I was telling your screener there, I put you, Janet Mefford, and Sandy Reels against any man, woman in radio or TV or media and speaking the word. I'm serious. I'm a vet like you. I'm a retired vet, been out 20 years. Dad retired Marine, son retired Air Force. Got a son in the Air Force and is a cop right now in the Air Force Reserve. My baby boy's been in, all three of them been in the Middle East and been back. That retired Marine, been to Vietnam 3 times. I had to toot his horn. He's still living, still teaching Taekwondo in South Carolina. But, Stacy, I wasn't going to get into it, and I'm not, because I know you got a lot of callers waiting, but the first one about the abortion, there's something wrong, Stacy, and I'm African American. I'm black. Okay.
All right. Permanently tanned.
Stacey, there's something wrong with a person, okay, black or white, but especially that you have no problem with ripping a baby's arms off and sucking the baby's brains out while they're still moving in the womb. That's what God calls, to say a reprobate mind.
Mm-hmm.
If a person can actually do that and clap for it and root for that, there is something mentally wrong with them. And isn't it funny, Stacy, how the people who are pro-abortion have already been born? Isn't that funny?
It's fascinating. It's fascinating. Just imagine if you said you were going to rip them apart. What if you said, we're going to rip you apart limb from limb? They'd say, well, that's a crime. Oh.
And not just that, Stacy, your last guess. Wasn't going to get into that either. But your last guess, it's just like the abortion thing. Isn't it funny how you want to be anti-death penalty until one of your 2-year-old, your 3-year-old, or your person, or your relatives have had their head blown off or raped or stabbed 9,000 times. I really wish abortion was retroactive. So somebody can go back and take some of them out. Now, God forgive me for saying that, but that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, it gets your blood up. You feel like there's just so much idiocy going on.
What about the man molesting a little baby? I guess he should. And death penalty, if they would do it right and not put them on death row for 20, 30, 40 years.
There you go.
Now, Stacey, you just like me. If there's any reasonable doubt, you don't kill that person.
That's right. You don't kill people where you have a reasonable doubt.
Shotgun, Stacy.
I have to say about it is
Bible down like a shotgun.
Every single time I hear someone talking about being against the death penalty, it just tells me that they're not willing to spend the same amount of effort that they're spending on switching this law up on reforming the system. And you know why? I'll tell you why, Aaron, because reforming the system is difficult and it takes a long time and it takes work. But there are people in this country who have gone into systems, government systems, and seen them incorrect and fixed them. One man was the one who fixed our occupational safety hazard, the whole OSHA thing. One man created that and saved thousands of lives and saved tens of thousands of people's arms and fingers and limbs because people were getting hurt in factories. And he came to work for the government and realized that the reason why people were still getting hurt was because there was no standard and they weren't tracking the people getting hurt. And he was able to turn it around by himself in, I think it was like 8 years. I heard this story in a book I was listening to on audio CD. And I'm telling you, and I have nothing against Hannah Cox. She seems like a God-fearing Christian woman she's an amazing communicator. But if she would take her energy and her prodigious mind power and put it towards reforming the system, imagine what we could do. I don't think everybody who's murdered someone should be subject to the death penalty. But just eliminating the death penalty doesn't make any sense to me. Aaron, have a fantastic weekend, and thank you for calling the show. Let's go to Randy in Texas. Hey, Randy, thanks for calling in today.
Stacy?
Yes?
Oh,
no, we lost you. Please call back if you can. I'm sorry that we lost you. June in Arkansas. Oh, and if you want to call in, 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. June in Arkansas. Thank you for calling in. Happy Friday to you.
Oh, thank you. I enjoy your show immensely. Your last person that you had,
Hannah Cox. Yes.
She is so wrong. I work as a nurse in a state prison, and I can assure you that they are well treated, and a lot of them try very hard to find ways that they can turn around and sue the system. It's ridiculous. I mean, the death penalty is not given easily. It's usually for very horrific crimes. And you're right. Turning your heart to God will save you for eternity, but it does not negate the consequences of your actions.
It doesn't. And that's the part that is the most frightening about sin, that I think sometimes as Christians we kind of turn away from that, or we just kind of paper over it. But I mean, there's been many times when I've been studying in Bible study where our Bible study leader has pointed out that God is merciful and he really doesn't give us what we deserve. We deserve so much worse than what he gives to us. And sometimes the consequence of our sin, it's lessened. He's merciful to us. He doesn't always give us everything. But other times we can repent and we can come back to him and we can be forgiven, but we still have to kind of suffer through the consequences. And so I am by no means some bloodthirsty maniac who just thinks, if someone commits a crime, they should be killed. But sometimes if you just read the news and if you click the links, because sometimes I just don't, I have to not click the links. I'll save that story for next week because I'm going to the weekend. I need to go in. Okay. You click the links and you read what people are doing to each other, and you know that the Bible is true when it says we are depraved and our heart condition is depraved. And so the death penalty is meant to be a deterrent. As it currently is adjudicated, it is not. So the system should be reformed. And that is what I would like to see happen. Let's go to Vilma in Mississippi. Hey, thank you for calling the show today.
Hi. Okay, hello. I wanted to say that you are a great speaker, so knowledgeable. I mean, you're a walking encyclopedia of facts. You are great. And since you are a woman and black, you ought to run for president. Because I believe you would win hands down. And I so much appreciate the way that you speak, the scripture that you always have to back up what you speak of. And so God bless you. And I know just listening to you that your husband would still still be the man he is, even if his wife was the president, because you put him right in the place of the head of his household, as all foolish young women nowadays don't seem to. So God bless you. Keep up the wonderful work. We do appreciate it. Thank you, honey.
Thank you, Velma. Have a nice weekend. That is really high praise, and I appreciate that. That's so nice for her to say that. I want to go to a couple more callers. We still have good time. It's Friday. It's really nice to be able to chat with all of you guys. Stephen in Michigan. Hey, thanks for calling the show.
First time caller.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for calling.
I'm glad you brought up the what do they call it, the Noahic covenant. And yes, it's never been canceled out. And people are created in the image of God. I'm pro-justice. You know, Paul said nobody's got a right to put me to death, but I've done nothing to be put to death for. But if I had, I don't, refuse to be put to death. I like how liberals, they'll change wording like life in prison without parole. That's what we have in Michigan. All that is death by imprisonment. And yes, you're making the victims pay for it, and it's not carried out quickly, so nobody fears it. A lot of those people, they'll never come to salvation because they think someday somebody's going to let them out, and they still can kill. They can kill. I got a niece that works in the prison. People that work in the prison get murdered sometimes. Other prisoners in prison that have done lesser crimes, but are around them can get murdered. And sometimes they get out of prison when they murder somebody and go to court. So it's like a little vacation. You get out, go to court, and then go back to your cell.
It's the whole thing we need reform there. And I go back to, that is where we should put our efforts. And it takes a long time, right? Stephen, that is the reason why we don't see the Democrats working harder to restore the Black family to prominence, because that takes decades of work, and it means you're going to have some failures, and you're going to have to deal with people, and people are difficult, and changing and making new habits is hard. But that is where we're supposed to be pouring our efforts, not at making the government stronger or taking away mechanisms by which justice can be meted out. So I agree with you. Thank you for calling the show today, and happy Friday. Marie in South Carolina. Hey, Marie, thanks for calling the show.
Hi, Stacy, first-time caller.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for calling.
Love your show. I just want to touch base real quick. I think the Black community, especially Black women, need to understand that Margaret Sanger, who's with Planned Parenthood, used that as a tool to eliminate or reduce the so-called undesirable population, meaning Black people. So I think we need to encourage Black women to have their babies, and let's adopt them out. Let's work on that. But they're not doing them any favors by advocating for them to have abortions over everything else.
It's true. It's true.
And the second thing about the death penalty, unfortunately, if we could start doing Bible studies in schools like we used to do, by the time we were waiting on these adults who murder people to accept Christ, the deed's already been done, and most of them are repeat offenders.
They are.
So, yes, the system needs to be changed, but it needs to start when the kids were little, and understand that there are consequences for things that we do. I have friends who are teachers, and they say horrible stories about how children are acting, and many of our teachers are leaving something that they love to do because you cannot control children.
But you know what? What makes them controllable? You know what makes what civilizes children? People are always so shocked when I say this. I can see their faces, their eyes get a little big. Reading scripture. When children read the word of God, they are civilized. That is what the Bible does for us. It stomps down our sin nature and changes us so that we are more like Christ. And when we read the Bible, we learn that we need to pray. And when we pray, God rewrites our genetic code. He overwrites it with his genetic code so that we are made more like him. Every prayer, every Bible verse that we read, every memorization, every time we say to someone, like I say to you, God is so good and I love him so much and I'm so grateful for what he's doing in my life, he is right there changing us in that moment. And when we say we can't read the Bible to kids in school, we're basically saying we'd rather read it to you after you've killed somebody or committed a crime and you're in prison and you can't go anywhere else. Then we'll give you the Bible. It's an absolute, it's a wrong that we've got to right. But I've been saying this just for the last week or so, and I'm going to keep saying it. Those who desire the lives and the souls of those people that we're talking about right now, those kids, those young adults, even those who are in the prisons who they've committed crimes, but they can still come to Jesus Christ. The ones who want him the most are the ones who are going to win him. Right now, it looks like the liberals, the Planned Parenthood, Pukes, those people are winning, but they're not. We've read the end of the book. It's up to us. We've got to tell them about the gospel and win them for the kingdom, because in the end, that's what we're here to do. If you're leaving now, God bless you. Have a fantastic weekend. If you're sticking around, onenewsnow.com, news and information coming at you right now.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
There's a lot happening around us. That's why Christians need to stand strong on family values and morality. Hi, I'm Ray Rooney, editor of The Stand, a blog from the American Family Association. The Stand has timely, carefully written articles on relevant cultural issues that you can quickly forward to others. Visit afa.net/The Stand.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. President Trump wants to target sanctuary cities, contradicting a statement from the White House this morning. Rachel Sutherland has more from Washington.
This time it's not fake news. President Trump confirming a Washington Post story that the administration is considering sending captured immigrants to sanctuary cities. The president tweeted, due to the fact that Democrats are unwilling to change our very dangerous immigration laws, we are indeed, as reported, giving strong consideration to placing illegal immigrants in sanctuary cities only. This after the White House released a statement saying the plan was briefly considered, then dropped. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, whose district could be affected, says the president is using humans, including children, as political pawns. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
Police in Minnesota are investigating an incident at the Mall of America. Here's Fox's Jeff Manasso.
The southeast corner of the Mall of America is closed off as police investigate what witnesses describe as a man pushing or throwing a child from the third-floor balcony.
The child has been transported to the hospital and is currently receiving care. Witnesses also indicated that the suspect took off running immediately after the incident. That suspect has been taken into custody.
Bloomington Police Chief Jeff Potts only saying that the 24-year-old suspect did not know the child, a 5-year-old, who's critically hurt. It's an ongoing investigation. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
Law enforcement officials in Boston say security will be tight during Monday's marathon. Fox's Tanya J. Powers has that story.
Uniformed and plainclothes officers will be stationed along the entire 26.2-mile route of the Boston Marathon and at security checkpoints. Some of the safety measures in place include bans on coolers, backpacks, and weapons, and surveillance cameras will be used. Boston Police Commissioner William Gross stressed vigilance for everyone attending the marathon.
We know what happened before. Let's be each other's eyes and ears. This is our city, our marathon. Let's look out for each other.
Police will be using drone detection technology as the race course is a no-drone zone. About 30,000 participants run the marathon each year. Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
Many people continue to check out the new film Unplanned, which tells the story of former Planned Parenthood clinic director turned pro-life champion Abby Johnson. Stephen Ertelt of Life News applauds people for seeing the film, but he says they shouldn't forget about the Gosnell movie that came out earlier this year.
You know, the abortion industry is Planned Parenthood, but it's also all these independent abortion doctors and abortion centers like Kermit Gosnell who are pushing the envelope as far as they can. You've got an abortion industry now that, like I said, is pushing abortions up to birth, and that's exactly what he was doing, and that is going on in other states as well. So people need to understand that the abortion industry is about selling abortions, which is unplanned, and it's about doing abortions as absolutely far into pregnancy as you can get away with, which is the Gosnell movie.
Kermit Gosnell of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, was sentenced to 3 life terms in jail for murdering babies during late-term abortion procedures. And that's not me being editorial. That's how NBC Philadelphia worded it in a 2013 news report. A small number of restaurants and stores are going cash-free in the U.S., looking to cater to customers who increasingly pay with a card or smartphone. But a backlash is growing against the practice that some say discriminates against those who lack bank accounts or rely on cash for most of their daily transactions. Earlier this week, Amazon said it would start accepting cash at its cashless stores, due in part to this criticism. In final news this hour, candy maker Mars Wrigley Confectionery is offering a candy tasting internship. The sweet details from Mark Mayfield.
The paid position is similar to last year's World's Sweetest Internship, but this year's winner will also be required to organize public events and activities. The intern must be willing to taste test new flavors in the Chicago-based factory. The 8 to 12-week opportunity will also include a signing bonus of 1 year's worth of candy. The company says you must be at least 21 years old to apply and be someone who isn't afraid to ring every doorbell in every neighborhood on Halloween.
That is American Family News for this hour. For more information, visit our website, onenewsnow.com. We're also on Twitter and Facebook.
Doc, I've been feeling a little out of sorts lately. Can you help?
Well, let's try a few questions. What do you think of when I say the word Roku?
Oh, my wife and I used to love that dance when we were younger.
Yes, I'd say you're a little out of touch.
What do you recommend?
I recommend you listen to AFR.
American Family Radio. Available on Apple and Android products, Amazon Alexa, and now available on Roku.
And then we'd whip, and then we'd nay-nay. Oh, it was wonderful.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Julian Assange embarrassed virtually everyone in power in Washington. He published documents that undermined the official story on the Iraq War and Afghanistan. He got Debbie Wasserman Schultz fired from the DNC. He humiliated Hillary Clinton by showing that the Democratic primaries were in fact rigged. Pretty much everyone in Washington has reason to hate Julian Assange.
The White House floated a proposal to release captured immigrants into sanctuary cities to send a message to Democrats. But Immigration and Customs Enforcement pushed back on concerns over liability, negative public relations, and budget issues.
The Ohio governor signing today what critics condemn as the most restrictive abortion law in the country, and what supporters celebrate as a victory, one certain to be challenged in court.
It's the essential function of government to protect those who cannot protect themselves.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Hey everybody, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being here in Hour 2. You are the guest in Hour 2, so feel free to call in and join me today. It's such a beautiful day in the Midwest. I'm in Missouri now. You may be somewhere else where you're experiencing, like, for instance, if you're in the mountain regions, I heard y'all had a blizzard. God bless you. I mean, I'm sure you're used to it because you're living there, but wow, I am so glad it's not snowing here. Yesterday, I went out and I took a little survey. You know how but basically you cut everything back for the fall and you go into the winter and you're just hoping that all of your plants, the new ones that you put in, you hope they survive and come back. And so I was just going out there looking, and a couple of them, they're looking kind of iffy. So I did. I went down into the roots and I took a look at the roots, and then I covered everything back up and I said a little prayer over those two. But the others, they look like they're coming back. So I've been doing that and just trying to kind of get outside a little bit, because I do think you spend more time outside, it just lifts your spirits and you really get to appreciate what God has given to us in the way of our beauty, our nature here in America. We just have so many beautiful things to look at that are a part of our natural everyday outside experience. So anyway, we have a ton of different things we're going to get to in this hour of the program. We are going to talk about Julian Assange and this whole push to kind of demonize him. And I've been really sad to see some people that I respect greatly online talking about how he's this horrible person. And I don't think he's an angel. I don't think Julian Assange is just like, not at all. But he is someone who took information that was, the person who stole the information is the one who should still be in jail. But because he is transgendered, he's out. And now they're trying to demonize Julian Assange because he embarrassed people. So we'll get into that too. But I want to go to the phones. Here's the call line for you. And I just love chatting with you guys, even the people who disagree. I know people think, oh, she's thin-skinned. I am who I am, whatever. 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. Let's go to David in Georgia. Hey, David, thanks for holding on. Happy Friday. Hello. Uh-oh, it looks like we lost him. David, if you want to call back, we'd love to talk to you. Jackie in Tennessee, thanks for calling the show.
Hi.
Hi there.
Good to be on with you.
Oh, nice to talk to you.
I just want to say thank you for being so raw and so real. You draw the line and say, yeah, I said it. That's right. You want to do something about it? I love it when you do that because I call it having ovaries,
Right.
So,
you get to a place where you're just like, oh, I just said that. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry.
Yeah, but it's so good. It just lets people know, good or bad or indifferent, where you stand on any situation or circumstances you're talking about. So to tie all those subjects about death into one little knot, whether it's slavery, abortion, or the death penalty, I put my money where my mouth is. I support AFR.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Jackie.
I am so glad I became a giver because you guys give us so much information and so much inspiration and not a whole lot of entertainment. Big difference.
Well,
we
that's
do. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Jackie. I appreciate that, and I just want to piggyback on what she said. I've always been kind of what you see is what you get, and you know how it is as you get a little older, you become more of yourself. That's what I feel like, and especially if you're checking in, you're reading your word, you realize you're more of yourself, but you also are more aware of yourself, of your own sin, of your own mistakes, of your own failings, and it just you just become to a place where you don't want to tolerate any of the stuff that's going on. And I think one of the things that's most enraging about all these stories, whether it's abortion or the southern border or even this Julian Assange thing, is that there's this huge double standard. And sometimes, and I have heard, and I didn't hear Hannah Cox do this, so I'm not talking about Hannah Cox, but I do have people sometimes who are arguing against the death penalty. They say, well, you're pro-life. Well, how can you compare a baby, an innocent baby who's never even breathed any but little bit of air, to someone who has committed a murder, someone who had every opportunity not to commit murder and they did anyway? And remember, death penalty cases are not, it's not when you've done a crime of passion. A death penalty case is not when, you can be premeditated in the murder that you commit and still not be a death penalty case. So this is by no means, supporting the death penalty doesn't mean every person who commits a crime that ends in someone dying then is subject to the death penalty. It's for those heinous, just unbelievable criminal acts that result in the death of another person. So we're talking about something that the death penalty is meant to be rare, but it's also meant to send a message, and it is also biblical. So I continue to call for reform, and I think that hard work that we all have to participate in some way. We can't all be, at the courthouse steps or but we do all have something we can do. And I want to remind you, remember, when you're making comments on different pages and stuff like that, don't forget, if the issue is something that can be handled by your legislator, whether it's your state and local legislator, your mayor, your county executive, your elected state rep for the state or for the Senate, state Senate, send them a letter. If it's for, your federal representative, your federal senator, the two that you have for your state, send yours a letter. And we have to get comfortable doing that again. And I know we right now we're not as comfortable, but we can do it. Let's go to David in Georgia. Hey, thanks for calling the show today.
Hello, Stacy. How are you today?
Doing pretty good. How about you?
Yeah, doing good. Kind of hot here in South Georgia, but anyhow, speaking about the death penalty, and I've heard part of what the other lady was saying, and she said, back in the Bible days, they had to have two witnesses. Back in the Bible days, they didn't have all the technology that we have now to make proof of something that happened, whether there was a witness or not. And also, if they would go ahead and do a survey or do it, check back and see the crimes that used to be committed when they said, okay, he's guilty, and 2 days later they hung him high. There was a lot less of the murdering going on and killing that deserved the death penalty, instead of letting them sit in at taxpayers' expense for so long a time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there wasn't the government system of them automatically getting your money so they could pay for it. You know what I mean? The lack of technology meant that they could execute someone. And there were certain times in the Bible when you read in the Old Testament, there were times where there was a lot of murder and wickedness, and God would, he would come in and he would judge the people. But you're also right. There had to be two witnesses, because otherwise one person's word against the other. And they were quick with it because there wasn't a whole lot of prisons and things like that for them to put people in. There were prisons, but it wasn't like here now where we have multiple prisons in every state and there's a whole industrial prison complex, and just completely different time. But it doesn't negate what God's word has said. I appreciate you making that point. It's important for us to kind of put a context to it. And to kind of think, I like thinking it through. I like hearing the other side and then spending time thinking about it, which I did after I read her article. And then I went and looked to see, has she changed my mind? And what does God's word say? And that is what I shared when she was on with us. And thank you, David. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend. All right. So we have still more time for you to call in if you want. 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. Now, I want to catch up here. First off, Tucker Carlson, who y'all know he's my best friend. Y'all can look on Facebook and see that we took a picture together. Okay, we're not best friends, but we met once, and I think he's brilliant. And he made a point last night that I thought, I try not to play too much audio from Tucker Carlson, right? Because, he's great. His show's good every night. But this was specifically interesting because of this news story where Julian Assange has been arrested. And I do not have a problem with him being arrested and extradited for, I think there was some kind of sex crime charge, like a rape or some kind of sexual assault. And this isn't the Law Show or the Nancy Show or whatever that show was where the lady was a lawyer and every case she had a comment and she knew all the backstory. It's not that at all. But the point that he's making here should have all of us thinking about what our government does to people who expose it, right? Because remember who he embarrassed? Hillary Clinton. Remember who still has legions of minions working in the federal government? Hillary Clinton. Who else did he embarrass? What did we learn? And why are people still angry about us learning that? So listen to number 2.
Well, if you watched a lot of the coverage of this story today on television, you likely came away with the understanding that Julian Assange is some kind of Russian spy who's in trouble tonight because he stole classified documents from the U.S. government. That is not true. It's factually incorrect. Saying so is not a defense of Assange. We're not here to promote him or excuse any number of things he said over the years that we disagree with quite a lot. But just so it's clear, whatever his sins, Assange did not steal documents from the United States government. He did not hack the DNC servers. He didn't break into John Podesta's Gmail account. There is no proof that he is working for the Russian government or ever has worked for the Russian government. Assange has never been charged with any of that and wasn't today, no matter what they tell you. If you're upset about the theft of classified documents from the U.S. government, and there is reason to be, we already know who did that. A 22-year-old Army private named Bradley Manning, now called Chelsea Manning. In 2013, Manning pleaded guilty to stealing secret material and got 35 years in prison for it. Shortly after that, Barack Obama commuted Manning's sentence. This allowed Manning to leave jail decades early, go back on television as a commentator, and then run for political office. So if your real concern is America's national security, you have someone to be angry at, Barack Obama. And yet, strangely, nobody is. Instead, they're furious at Julian Assange for printing the documents that other people stole.
Mm-hmm. Now, why do you think then Bradley Manning was so up in arms about what he saw, and why did he steal the documents? Well, he stole them because, as we all learned, there was a bunch of stuff that we were told as the American people that wasn't true. There were things that, so was it right for him to do that? No, it's never right to steal documents and publish classified information. But when he did, what did we learn? So this is a complicated story. And the power players, the ones behind the scenes, the ones who you see getting blamed, the ones you see on TV sputtering and talking about, he's a Russian agent. Julian Assange is no more a Russian agent than Donald Trump is. He's a guy who saw an opportunity to publish information that had been stolen, that he knew this is the scoop of the century. And so he did. He gambled because previous to this, haven't the Democrats told us over and over again that we protect reporters, that confidential sources are never to be revealed? But now all of a sudden, we should throw him to the wolves. Why? Because he exposed Hillary Clinton and humiliated her, and she's never to be messed with. She's the queen bee. She puts Beyonce to shame. She's the one we all have to bow down to and, pay homage to her house dresses for $12,000 a pop. No. He doesn't get excused for anything that he's done wrong that they're charging with outside of the whole publishing of this information. But come on. We have to be more thoughtful about this. And I'm not saying you're not, but I'm putting that out there. Assange is not the number one boogeyman. It's the people behind the stories that he exposed. All right, when we get back, we'll have more for you. 866-963-2037. Be right back.
On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, we took the spices that we'd prepared and we went into the tomb. We found the stone rolled away from the tomb. When we went in, we didn't find the body of our Lord Jesus. Who took him? Where is he? Who took him?
Why do you look for the living among the dead?
Where's Jesus?
He's not here. He has risen.
Jesus was alive. He's alive.
Jesus was betrayed, abandoned, mocked, beaten, and then crucified on a cross for sinners like you and me. The Son of God was buried, and after 3 days, he rose from that grave. American Family Radio encourages you to rejoice in the glorious reality that our God is a living God.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Dennis Prager has a phrase that he's been using for some time. He says the left ruins everything. That is the title of a recent PragerU video by him. It surfaced in a recent commentary by him with the title, How the Left Keeps Me Religious. I really questioned his phrase the first few times I heard him say it. Perhaps it was the realization that every generalization has exceptions. But Dennis Prager is a thoughtful person, so I didn't reject the idea immediately. It is important to understand that Prager makes a distinction between liberalism and the left. Liberals and conservatives value truth. The left does not. And in his recent commentary, he acknowledges that liberals have done some good, but he then adds everything the left has touched, it has ruined. The most obvious example, he says, is the university. Harvard professor Steven Pinker, a liberal and an atheist, says the left has rendered the university a laughingstock. If you've been reading my commentaries for any length of time, you've heard me cite many examples, and Dennis Prager accuses the university of teaching gullible young students lies, immoral ideas, and foolish doctrines, and then goes on for 6 paragraphs with awful examples of what is taught on campus today. One example from his video that is briefly mentioned in his commentary is what the left has done to the arts. The God-centered West produced Bach and Michelangelo. By contrast, the left has produced mostly junk. He says there's nothing higher to aspire to because the focus is often merely to shock, not to inspire. In fact, there's a large amount of so-called art that is nothing more than scatological art. The Bible and a belief in God were important in the formation of Western culture and in the creation of America. Rejection of those ideas has given us a leftist perspective that seems to be trying to ruin everything. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Socialism, go to viewpoints.info/socialism. That's viewpoints.info/socialism.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the show. Get over to stacyontheright.com and hit the subscribe button. Also find me on Twitter and Instagram at Stacy on the Right. Right now, it's my pleasure to go to the phones and take another call. 866-963-2037 are the call lines. If you want to join us, 866-963-2037. Doug in Oklahoma. Hey, Doug. Thanks for calling the show.
Hey, Stacy. How are you doing?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
I am, all right. I'm an ordained janitor from Falls Valley, Oklahoma.
Awesome.
Bet you've never met an ordained janitor.
I don't think so.
Well, I've been in business for myself since I got out of the Navy in 1981, and God told me to take the job, so
nice.
I took the job.
Nice.
And I've been blessed with it. Anyway, and I've been blessed to be able to listen to you every day as I work.
Oh, thank you.
Nice. When you were talking about the death penalty, it brought to my mind when California suspended the death penalty, might have been when you were real young or not born yet. I'm not sure how old you are. But they suspended the death penalty, and during that suspension, I believe during that suspension, Charles Manson and his family were famous for killing a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm.
And they could not be given the death penalty. And he still lives in his insanity in a California jail.
And he inspired a crazy movement.
I believe that California remembers that and may never do it again, no matter how liberal they get.
Yeah. It's so had he been put to death, tens of thousands of people wouldn't have had their minds perverted by him and his lunacy. I mean, it was literally as if him being arrested and convicted set him up to be some kind of a martyr, and they just couldn't stop him from. He was perverting people. Charles Manson culture cropped up there, and women moved to California so they could live near the jail, and they wanted to marry him. It was just lunacy, all of which could have been avoided because he killed a lot of folks. He should have just been put to death. Another example. Anyway, yeah, great point. Thank you for calling the show, Doug, and have a great weekend. Thanks for listening while you're working. It's fantastic. Okay, let's get back to this. And I talked about this just a tad. This is the breaking story for today, which is that the White House planned to release immigrants into sanctuary cities to punish Democrats. I think the only mistake that was made here, well, there were two. The first one is that they said, we're going to punish Democrats. They should have just said, this is what they voted for. We're giving them what they voted for, instead of saying punish Democrats. But the other mistake was that Kirstjen Nielsen was in charge, and she wouldn't help them execute on this. And they have people there in the Department of Homeland Security who felt this wasn't a good idea. Well, of course it's not. If the point of bringing in all of these illegal aliens, 1.5 million a year, is to change Republican districts into Democratic districts, then why would Democrats want you to send illegal aliens to places that are already sanctuary cities? The idea is to make more sanctuary cities, right? Now, I don't think that's what will happen. Remember, whenever people sit down and try to plan stuff out and say, if we do X, then these people will do Y, the people usually surprise them by doing, 2, 3, 4, 5. Notice I said numbers instead of letters. That's how people are. That's why people are so hard to manage. You can't actually accurately predict what groups of people will do. And even with predictive models, and you have history that you can look at and all that, you can't, without a shadow of a doubt, say, if we do this, they'll do that. But you can say, y'all voted for this, so therefore, here you go. Here's the illegal aliens you were looking for. So here's number one. Uh-oh. So I'm not sure if we're getting number one here. I don't think so. But it's a clip about the White House planning to release immigrants into sanctuary cities to punish the Democrats. Oh, okay. So we're still on the same subject here. We have the Customs and Border Patrol official. He's testifying before Congress, and he reads this MS-13 text message. Now, they get to take the phones and confiscate the property, anything they find on you, when they arrest you. And MS-13, they communicate with each other the same way that you and I do. We text our family members, et cetera, et cetera. Well, Customs and Border Patrol officials actually they have proof that MS-13 uses our flawed and broken system to get into the country. They want to be here just as bad as anybody else because they want to deal drugs while they're here. So let's play number 5.
People are traveling across hemispheres to attempt to legally enter the U.S. using the same pathways as the Central Americans. We also encounter known gang members from some of the most violent gangs on earth, including MS-13 and 18th Street. Some of these gang members are fraudulently posing as part of these migrant families. I'd like to share with you a translation of a text message that we intercepted from an MS-13 gang member who is part of one of these fraudulent family units. He wrote, "You should see the amount of Hondurans that are traveling with a child. And they pay less to the smugglers in order to be delivered to the Border Patrol. And it's a direct trip. They have them a few days with Border Patrol, and afterwards they are released. There are a lot of people with that law. That is the easiest way right now. Entire families are coming. So make no mistake about it, the word is getting out. If you are part of a family, if you bring a child, you will be released. Just last Friday, our agents apprehended an adult Honduran male with a 1-year-old child. After questioning the man admitted the child was not, in fact, his. Something has to change."
So do you understand what he just said there? I need us to all kind of just sit here in this moment and let this information marinate on our brains. Some 1-year-old child was used like a plane ticket. You know how you have to scan your plane ticket before they let you on the plane, and if you scan it, it says you're supposed to be going to Chicago, and that plane's going to Denver. They won't let you on the plane. These people, these horrible, some of them are drug dealers, some of them are people who just want a better life. They are actually using children like tickets. And if that doesn't just burn you up, when I think about, have you been out recently and seen a 1-year-old? I mean, a 1-year-old child they're constantly looking for their mom or their dad's face. I don't know if you guys remember this from when your kids were small. I'm sure you do. I remember our kids, especially because they spent all of their time with me because I was a stay-at-home mom. So they would, if I left the room and came back in, or if we were in a group of people and I wasn't holding them, and they would, I would say something, I could see them from across the room. They would just turn their head and keep scanning until they found my face. And then, of course, within 30 seconds, arms are up. I have to go over and get them, right? They're like, "Oh, you're back? We're supposed to be together." You know how babies are. Until they want to get down. But they don't want you to go far because they should be able to still turn around, and within 3 heads, they want to be looking at your face. Imagine the trauma that 1-year-old is going through traveling thousands of miles on a bus or on by car or by truck, and how this person isn't taking good care of them. They don't need to take good care of the baby or to treat the baby kindly. They're just using it to get into America. Just think about what these kids are going through. They're being used it's worse than being used as a pawn. It's like, just treating, it's like slavery. They have no choice in the matter. Their feelings don't matter. They're not going to be taken care of properly. And when they get into America, they're abandoned. And then, oh my goodness, so we'll get to that next segment. I have some audio of the Lieutenant Governor of Texas. He says they found just the ones they found. In other words, the corpses and remains that they found, 1,671 bodies covered since 2011. And he said it's a burial ground. He said they can't collect all of the remains. They can't even find them all. They just stumble across them when they're, chasing a group of illegal aliens or, they're whatever they're doing, they just stumble across them. This is what actually changed the president's mind. They took the president down to this area and showed him where they find, this is on people's private property, they find these dead bodies. Ranchers will go out, and ranchers expect to find, dead animals and carcasses, coyotes or an animal that's been killed by another animal, and then, the carcass has not been eaten. So, they expect to find that. They're ranchers. They don't expect to find human remains. But this is what's going on at the southern border. Again, an abomination. Sin run amok. This is what's happening. And people who defend it, they have no excuse. You cannot defend people coming into the country illegally and dying, and they don't even have anybody to know that they're dead. No one knows they're dead. For all their relatives know, they could be in the United States living and on their way to a good life. Their relatives don't know. And the remains are elderly people, adults, and children. They're finding the remains of children out there. I mean, I can't see how anybody would be able to justify what we're seeing there. So I saw the story today. I made a moment on Twitter, and I started tweeting out about how it's just so crazy that the president wouldn't have followed through on that. But it looks like the reason he didn't follow through is because he got pushback from DHS and Kirstjen Nielsen. And so what I want to see is I want to see the president actually do something about that. Like, I want to see him put the illegal aliens who are being released into the country into sanctuary cities. I do want to see him do that. If he has to take a little PR flack, so be it. He's taken PR flack before. Sometimes you take a little flack when you're over the target. So let's go to clip one. The clip is explaining how this whole thing came about with this planning to release the immigrants into sanctuary cities to so-called punish Democrats.
A new report from the Washington Post details the White House plan to drop detained migrants off in sanctuary cities as a punishment against Democrats. The Post report said officials in the White House introduced the idea twice. Both times came when Democrats were strongly opposing the administration's policies at the border. One of the areas where this would have happened was in San Francisco, in House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's district. According to the Post, the White House thought this idea would kill two birds with one stone. One, it would help with the limited space in detention centers, and two, serve as a warning to Democrats on the Hill. Stephen Miller, the controversial immigration hardliner, was one of the advocates of the proposal. One Homeland Security whistleblower said, quote, "What happened here is that Stephen Miller called people at ICE, said if they're going to cut funding, you've got to make sure you're releasing people in Pelosi's district and other congressional districts. ICE officials and attorneys thought the idea could be illegal and would be a PR crisis." CNN also reported that the president advocated for the plan, asking former DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen to execute it, but she reportedly pushed back.
Right. So she pushes back, right? And I get it. She'd already taken a lot of flack. She's getting mistreated, et cetera, et cetera. But how else do you force the Democrats to do what it is that they right now are not going to do? They're getting their way. They have no motivator, nothing that would cause them to want to create legislation to plug these holes up and give DHS the power they need to maintain the border. So without any kind of motivator, then you have to rely on what you have. And Donald Trump is a pro at using, hey, these are the cards I've got, I'm going to use them. But then you got DHS Secretary Nielsen standing in the way. I don't know why he waited this long to have her submit her resignation. Not because she's a horrible person, but if you're not willing to do the job that your boss is asking you to do, then it is time to go. Stop hanging around. Stop acting as if this isn't about the president being wrong here. There is nothing wrong with saying the people who are voting for these people to be here, the people who are insisting that these people are here, should be the ones to support them. And I saw someone post earlier, well, there are supporters. President Trump has supporters in Nancy Pelosi's district. Of course he does. But the people who support Nancy Pelosi have to be made to reap the benefits of what they're voting for. They want more Nancy. They want more Nancy Pelosi policies. Then by all means, receive what you're voting for. I tell you. So sometimes we see things take a while to percolate and come up. I'm just guessing, but I'm pretty sure if 17,000 illegal aliens arrived at one time in Nancy Pelosi's district, that a bunch of her constituents would change their mind about sanctuary city policy. A bunch of them would suddenly find that they had a few conservative roots. And I don't mean conservative like they'd stop voting for Democrats, but I think they would demand, the phone calls they would burn the call lines down at Nancy's office. And she would be forced to come out. And you know how she does. Whenever she has to make a reversal, she doesn't say, I apologize, I was in the wrong, we're making a reversal. No, she'll just say, we're reversing on this because it's no longer beneficial to the American people. She'll never say anyone else was right. She would never go to Donald Trump and say, hey, President Trump, let's shake hands, let's make a deal. She would just take credit for fixing the problem, and so be it. This isn't about trying to give credit or get credit. It's about stopping the influx. The only way to do it is to play the cards you've been dealt. You've been dealt 100,000 illegal aliens in 1 month, then it looks like San Francisco's population is going to go up by 100,000 people. That's what I would say. However many are subject to catch and release would be released into every single, you just go down the line. There's actually a list of sanctuary cities. Just go through and check it off. So I want to get to this one more story real quick. Did you know that Google actually labeled the unplanned film propaganda? Google has metadata tags, which they put onto things that you're watching. And what they did was they put on the actual unplanned film, when you look it up on Google, it says, it says propaganda. Isn't that something? They can't just let people go watch it. They have to try to stop you from seeing it. They can't let you make up your own mind because they're scared if you see it, you'll make up your mind and it won't be for their side. That's why you have to go see it. Don't let them stop you from getting what's there for you. All right, when we get back, we're going to listen to Bernie the Millionaire talk about millionaires and billionaires right after this.
This week during our family worship time together, when we turned to the scripture, I was sharing with my family, and we were discussing the scripture that says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed. And I was explaining the whole caterpillar to cocoon to butterfly process. My son said, he's 6 years old, Daddy, I get it. We're like the caterpillars. God provides the cocoon, and God's desire all along is, even though we're in caterpillar form, is for us to become butterflies. And then look what he said. But you know when we get into trouble, Daddy? When we try to move from caterpillar to butterfly and we skip over God. And when you try to skip over God, you think you have your wings, but you fall flat.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
And I had to tell you, I had to fight back tears in the moment because I'm saying, oh, Lord, he's getting this.
I love AFR. You say it's on the radio, too?
Here at American Family Radio, we know that many people find their audio entertainment in other places than the radio. So our programming is available with the AFR app on Apple and Android devices, through Amazon Alexa, and now available on Roku.
I just love the podcasts.
That too. American Family Radio, streaming or podcast, now available wherever you are. And we're on the radio.
Family is an institution set forth by God, one man and one woman for life, with the outflow being children produced by that union. It's obvious to all that there is an attack on the family in our country, and especially on fathers. Whether it's the cycle of sin that persists in our families or the pressure from our government to exclude men from being intimately involved, the strategic battle is on for the souls of men. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
This is House Call for Health. Pickle juice, your new best health-related friend or your latest unhealthy foe. The liquid made with salt water, spices, garlic, and sometimes vinegar is most commonly used to turn cucumbers into pickles. But health gurus are now turning to it.
Nowadays, people are buying it to use as a
like a sort of like a Gatorade or a health drink.
That's Alan Kaufman of the Pickle Guys shop in New York City. Registered dietitian Sherry Bookvarv.
People drink it for hydration as well as to decrease muscle cramping. But the other thing that people drink it for is the probiotic benefit of it.
But she says it's not all good news.
If you're drinking a lot of sodium, it can actually bloat you. So it may negate the effects of what you're doing for exercise to help you to feel better.
Trainer Lee Gerson says she drank pickle juice as a kid because she liked it, but now?
After running, like sometimes, especially in the summer, you're just really thirsty and water doesn't quite do it.
House Call for Health. I'm Anna Eliopoulos, Fox News.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Billionaires, 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 billionaires. I am not a billionaire. Millionaires. Millionaire, millionaire, millionaires, millionaires.
Now, I just want you to know, because you just suffered through that clip is like at least 1 minute and 30 seconds long of him saying millionaires and billionaires. And it's not a repeat. None of them are repeats every individual time. And they stop at 1 minute and 30 seconds. Now, I think that was like 12 seconds was more than you could take. You might even have a little tinge of a headache starting over your left ear or something from hearing him say it that much, which is why I'm so shocked that teenagers and young adults would be fine with this man being the president. Just imagine how much you'd have to listen to him. It's the same thing with Kamala Harris. You would have to listen to her talk all the time. People who say they can't stand to hear President Trump talk want to have Kamala Harris for the president or Bernie Sanders. I don't get it. I don't get that at all. All right. So call lines are still open. 866-963-2037. 866-963-2037. So I wanted to get to a couple more of the stories that we had for today. So this is kind of unbelievable, but I want to make sure that you get a chance to receive this unbelievable information. This is from the University of Kentucky. They've actually capitulated to a list of demands made by a group of students who've occupied their main building of the campus, voicing complaints about the university's alleged unfair treatment of Black and low-income students. They have formed a group called, two groups. The first group is the Black Student Advisory Council, and the second group is the Basic Needs Campaign. They sat in at the university administration building at the University of Kentucky, and they shut it down on April 1st, and they just stayed there. They said they weren't going to leave. They also went on a hunger strike. They were starving themselves, which I'm always surprised by this. I don't know about you guys, but if someone was upset with me and they decided to stop eating and I had to take a certain action to make them eat, which again, this is their own choice because I'm not making them not eat. I'm not depriving them of food. They're simply choosing not to eat because of something that I have or have not done. I would not care. Now, I don't know if this means I need an intervention or I need, Bible study chicks to lay hands on me or whatever. But I don't understand hunger strikes because I don't understand why people care when other people choose not to eat. I know some of the prisoners in Guantanamo Bay were refusing to eat because they weren't allowed to pray as often as they wanted to, or they didn't have certain rugs or something. Why does that work? I'm asking genuinely. I'm not being sarcastic. I don't understand why that works. I don't understand why, if someone told me they weren't eating, unless they lived in here, why I wouldn't just ignore it like I do anything else. When people don't like something that I've said or done and I become aware of it, it doesn't change anything. I don't change anything because of that. So why would I change anything because someone's not eating, especially when they have access to food? It's not like these people didn't have access to food. It's that they went on a hunger strike. So they said they were on a hunger strike because some students can't afford housing or food. So then the administrator of Kentucky, University of Kentucky, he said he had an obligation to meet with them, and he had an obligation to do everything in his power to help them because Kentucky University is their university. And my question is, if you're homeless and you don't have any food, how are you going to university? So he basically gave in to them. He's giving them a student center. He's giving them a permanent seat for Black students on search committees for administration officials, so administrators. when they hire them. They're going to collaborate with the Black Student Collective to determine exactly how to execute representation. They're going to take down a historic 1930s mural on campus that depicts scenes of Black people planting tobacco. They're going to revise the scholarship historically meant for underrepresented students and those in financial need, with the goal of enhancing the program specifically for Black students. So disenfranchising other students who have needs in favor of Black students. Do you see how this victim mentality seeps into the mind of young, impressionable people, and then it makes them do dumb stuff like this? And then in order to address the concerns around basic needs, Capilouto will merge 2 existing services into a one-stop shop to better handle requests related to food and housing insecurity. He says these will be continually assessed and replenished. Now, what's funny about that is they already had a food pantry for people who didn't have enough to eat, but they want one for Black people. So they've agreed to staff an on-campus basic needs center with 1 full-time employee to coordinate and plan the University of Kentucky's approach to basic needs. And I don't know what to tell you. I wish I could tell you something. I wish I could say something encouraging about that. He shouldn't be the administrator there, maybe. Maybe that's the encouraging thing. Maybe the people who, maybe they'll make a change in their leadership. I don't know. I just, sometimes you just feel really defeated when you read a story, because you think to yourself, a bunch of nincompoops just work this guy over by starving themselves. They went without food for 6 days. First of all, how many people in the audience? So if you're a faster, just put your little pinky up. I know I can't see you, but let's do this exercise together. Just want to think this thing through for a second. So let's be real here. It's just us. How hard is it to fast? It is hard, right? It is hard, especially when you're in a house. Even if you have just the slightest food, even if there's only crackers and water, you want to eat the crackers and water, no matter what there is. Even if there's something cooked that you're not really a fan of, once you start fasting, your body is like, food, I need food. And it is a battle to fast. So you're telling me that all these students went without food and water for 6 days, and we're supposed to believe that? As hard as it is to decide you don't want to eat anything? Come on. I don't buy it. I know how hard it is for me to fast. I just don't buy it. Anyway, so now I want to talk about name one time a government program accomplished its goal. Well, actually, before we get to that, okay, we have a good amount of time here. First, let's finish up our immigration discussion by going to the Texas Lieutenant Governor, who said 1,671 bodies were recovered at the southwest border since 2011. I need you guys to hear this, because this is the conversation that we're supposed to be having. It's number 4.
We were in San Antonio earlier in the morning, and the first person spoke up and said, when the president said, "What can we do for you in San Antonio?" And a gentleman named Gene Powell said, "Well, we need to build the barrier." And he said, and this is the reason. And one rancher after the other rancher after the next property owner talked about finding dead bodies on their property, 7 last week, 3 last month. And I said to the president, "Mr. President, we have recovered over 1,000 dead bodies in Texas since 2011, just out in nowheres." And let me tell you what the exact numbers are, Laura. We did the checking today. 1,671 dead bodies have been recovered in Texas, near and along the border. That's women, that's children, that's old people. These are the most vulnerable people. And the Democrats say they care about people. These are the most vulnerable people that the drug cartels and the human smugglers have taken across the border, given them a little bit of water, and left them to die. And that 1,671, Laura, that's the skeletal remains we find. There are thousands and thousands of people. And so he called in the media, and we said, this is the story. You want to cover a story? Go down. I'll take them in through the no man's land, and we'll find some skeletons, and we'll show them the photographs. Thousands of people have died coming to this country, and it really impacted the president.
Yeah, he just... If you think about what he's talking about, he means going out, and when he says finding remains, it might be it's remains, right? It's Sometimes it's skeletons. Sometimes it's remains, right? Come on. This is just too much. If you think about it, it's just too much. It has to be stopped. So over at the Washington Examiner, and this news is like coming in so fast. It's a Friday, but it's a full news day. President Trump has just announced, well, first of all, he announced that it's not off the table. Somebody else said it was off the table, this whole idea that they would send the illegal aliens to the districts of the people who have the sanctuary cities. President said that's not off the table, which I'm glad to hear. Second of all, he's just announced that he wants a battlefield commander on the border to stop illegal immigrants. His moves at DHS this week basically amount to an all-out war on illegal immigration. He plans to rewrite the rules of engagement and require his top aides to run the battle from the border. In other words, stop sitting in your cushy offices in D.C. on your, $10,000 desks and whatnot, and get down to the border and run the thing from down there. Because you know what? And you guys know this is true. If you've been in any kind of situation where you've had to solve problems quick, the closer you are to the problem, the faster your synapses will fire, your responses speed up. You start to really get into solving the problems as they come in. It's stressful. It's hard. But in the end, you get so much more done if you're close to the problem. If you are 30,000 feet off of that problem or, 10 states away from it, you're not going to have the same response time or the same sense of urgency that you would have if you were there. So it's appropriate for him to send them all down there. He says he wants a battlefield commander who will take the fight to the border and not get stalled or sidelined by agency and congressional politics. In other words, the swamp will be unable to touch you if you have an office on the border and you have to look at the remains of dead illegal aliens. If you have to look at the remains of dead children and babies, you're going to suddenly not care so much about the people in DHS who have been emailing you or texting you and saying, you can't possibly be siding with that horrible man. You'll be texting them pictures back and saying, you can't possibly be siding with this. Don't message me again. I have a job to do. That's what we need from these people. He says we have to have somebody on the battlefield from day-to-day basis in like a forward theater that's actually making decisions in real time to meet deadlines and meet targets. This is an official. It is very difficult to direct that from a distance. While the media has been focused on the West Wing's purge at Homeland Security, the possibility that the president will restore a program to separate illegal immigrant children from parents suspected of crimes, the administration has already moved on from that, and they're shifting to reducing numbers of illegal immigrants crossing the border or entering on asylum claims. One official said the goal is simple. We need to stop illegal immigration and bring those numbers down. Now, the president has, of course, taken to Twitter, which we all enjoy greatly. Everybody is now acknowledging that right from the time I announced my run for president, I was 100% correct on the border. Remember the heat I took? Democrats should now get rid of the loopholes. The border is being fixed. Mexico will not let people through. This was a tweet he sent out on April 9th. Now, Trump said, Trump actually has been frustrated with Homeland Security. He feels that they didn't get the message of his 2016 campaign. He's also worried that the Washington bureaucracy is too pro-immigrant and ignores the public's demands for tighter border controls. And he says there's a cultural bias of granting benefits to illegal immigrants, and that changing the culture to one of protecting U.S. workers and citizens rather than seeing the applicant as the client, that's the culture down at DHS and some of the agencies that are processing these people through. Wow. Can you imagine that? Working in an agency where people come into the country illegally and you see them as your clients, not the American taxpayers? You see them as the people you're supposed to serve? That's a management issue. That's somebody who's told people to feel that way. Workplace culture comes from the top down. If it stinks at the head, it's going to be rotten all the way through. He needs to switch some stuff up. So, a bunch of people have commented in on this piece. I'm just skimming through here really quickly. I want to give you the meat of the issue. There are some other issues. There are other articles that are connected here. I'll post this story from the Washington Examiner over on the Facebook page and in the YouTube stream. So if you want to read it, I know it's Friday, but if you want to take a look at so YouTube is acting like a Democrat. It won't let me post this story. That's not even cool. But I will post it on Facebook where I'm sure I can actually get it up. And I just, this isn't something that we enjoy or that we love. It's that we want it stopped. The sooner we can stop this, the sooner we can get to discussing some other things that are important. The president can get to doing some other issues, what have you. Yeah, I'm glad the president is making this change. And I hope that he's going to move on with it. I hope he's going to keep it going. So I've been talking about this for a couple of days and I didn't get to it. I want to talk about Illinois, which has the worst credit rating of any state. They have an $8 billion outstanding bill tab, a $3.2 billion deficit. That's next year's budget. And the worst part is the $250 billion they're on the hook for to pay to their pensioners. Now, what do we do when we have debt? Well, we tighten our belt up. But what they do is they demand more taxation. And 137,000 net residents have left the state since 2013. So what are they doing? Well, they're doubling down and asking for more tax revenue. They're not cutting their spending. And what they're going to do is drive even more people out of the state. And what should happen is that they should be fired. But that's not what happens in government, and that's too bad. All right, that's the show for today. Thanks for being here. Have a fantastic weekend. Get in the pew on Saturday or Sunday. Enjoy some time with the Lord and unplug for the weekend and get outside. All right, I've told you enough. Until next week.
The views